Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mark Pelka. I'm president of the Kennedy School Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Caucus. And on behalf of the LGBT Caucus, I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's IOP Forum event, John Amichi's speech, How Homophobia Hurts America. I'd also like to thank the Institute of Politics for its work and support in bringing John Amichi to Harvard for tonight's event. I'd also like to recognize Saed Atchan, who helped make tonight's event possible. We began working on this event to bring John Amichi to the Kennedy School last May. And to put that in perspective, we were working on it in between studying for final exams. And it's now my honor to introduce Dean Joseph McCarthy, Senior Associate Dean of the Kennedy School and Director of Degree Programs. Thank you so much.
Good evening and welcome. Welcome to the Kennedy School. Welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. I knew John F. Kennedy Jr. just a very little bit, but I think he would have been very pleased at this evening's event. I'm fortunate to get to introduce a man whom I look up to in many ways. I explained to him that I actually played center in high school, but you can tell how long ago that was. So tonight it is my pleasure to introduce to you the former NBA player, John Amichi, who will speak tonight on the subject of homophobia in America. The title, of course, as Mark said, is How Homophobia Hurts America. Mr. Amichi is author of the recently published book, Man in the Middle, which is about his playing days in the NBA while concealing his gay identity. It was not until February of this year, 2007, when Mr. Amichi publicly revealed his sexual orientation to a still shocked sports world. He received the expectant slurs and threats that sadly seem to always follow such an announcement. But despite such negative reactions, he has continued to share his experience in hopes of helping others come out and live their lives openly. Born and raised in the United Kingdom, he is a graduate of Penn State University. He's played professionally in Europe and for a number of NBA teams, including the Cleveland Cavaliers, Orlando Magic, Utah Jazz, and Houston Rockets. In the year 2000, he was honored as one of the NBA's most improved players, and he is the first and only British player to be inducted into the U.S. Basketball Hall of Fame, that for scoring the first points of this millennium. Since retiring from the NBA in 2003, he has become a well-known radio and television broadcaster and a political activist in the United Kingdom. He is also an official spokesman for the Human Rights Campaign's Coming Out project. He has remained active in the sports world. Using his experience, he created the Amichi Basketball Center, ABC, foundation that promotes youth participation in physical activity. Through the foundation, he has built and runs one of the largest community basketball facilities in the UK. On a personal note, if I may, I was particularly pleased to be asked to introduce Mr. Amichi this evening because several years ago I discovered that one of my old high school friends, an outstanding football player who went on to play for the University of Pennsylvania and then graduate the Harvard Law School, had for years felt that he had to hide the fact that he was gay, and had suffered greatly from having to listen silently to homophobic remarks and jokes. Edward S. Flanagan was finally able to publicly declare that he is gay, and he then went on to become the first openly gay candidate for the U.S. Senate when he ran as the Democratic nominee in Vermont several years ago. Eddie has since written about his experience and also spoke movingly about it from this very podium. So on behalf of my friend Ed, and all those who have suffered similarly, as well as on behalf of the Kennedy School of Government and our LGBT caucus, Student Caucus, please join me in welcoming Mr. John Amichi and congratulating him on his personal courage. I'll get this out of the way.
Thank you. Thank you. It's actually a little unsettling to be here. I was born in Boston. I know you can't really tell from my accent, and I got to come back here to play, obviously, against the Celtics numerous times, but I've never really, that's about as far as it's gone, from the hotel to the arena. So to actually be here and wander around, it feels strange. I want to point out first that along with all these other things that apparently I'm doing, I am a psychologist. In this country, I work in an industrial organizational setting with lots of large companies, organizations that want to try and write the way that they work. For most of them, it is simply a matter that they understand now that happy cows make better cheese, and they just want people to be more content at work. And if I can have a part of that, I'm really pleased. Might as well dive into it. I've been told already that I have to keep it short because the tradition here is apparently I say a small amount of things and then you grill me on the small amount of things that I say. I don't believe in a hierarchy of oppression. I don't believe that homophobia is more important. I don't believe that we can make those kinds of assessments because I don't personally believe that the aspects of my identity are supposed to joust for supremacy. My Nigerian heritage is not supposed to do battle with my Britishness, to do battle with my gayness, to decide where they are on the ladder of things. And that is the same way I view oppression and bigotry from the outside. It should not be, as it seems to be too often, that when you talk of bigotry to people, what they actually do is take off their shirt, bare their shoulders, and show you their back, and try and determine whether the marks that are left due to my color are deeper and somehow more meaningful than the marks that are left because of my orientation. So I do think it's important there. Everything is connected. All oppression and the pain that is caused by it is connected. We see clearly that in this day and age with the Gina situation, with the New York Knicks lawsuit, and with, frankly, with our interactions on a daily basis, the fact that I stood in, actually probably this suit, in New York 2 days ago and could not get a cab. We know that racism and sexism and misogyny and all their siblings are still alive and well. We know that they are hidden underneath like a thin, icy veneer. My theory with homophobia is simply that when we allow one aspect of bigotry to rise up unchallenged, what we do is create a breathing hole, a fissure in the veneer where all bigotry can take a breath. So it's not that homophobia is more important, it's just that its prevalence in polite society, the fact that you can walk through the corridors of a high school and be assailed, literally, with the word fag. I've worked with kids in this country. One, indeed, was a classic example, where he was a high school Euro football player, and very popular, and he was found hanging in his garage, dead, and he left a note that said, with one hand, his friends were patting him on the back, and with the other, they were stabbing him in the back. Because as he walked through the hallways of his school, people were using these words that were destroying him. Homophobia hurts America because it's a place where the obtuse, it's a place where the ignorant can find a place to roost, a place where apparently even God tells them that they are right in their spite. Because the Bible says that Glbt people, gay and lesbian people, are evil, right? We are responsible for any number of things. We are responsible for the breakdown of the family. We are responsible for the disintegration of society. We are responsible for the prevalence of disease and drug use. According to some, we are responsible for the events of 9/11. So it's this place where even faith communities sometimes let us down. And we look to faith communities sometimes for support. And faith communities are often a level line that determines for the rest of society whether something is acceptable or not. And when we do go to them, for sure, it is not fair to say that all faith communities reject Glbt people. However, many, we go to them for solace and care, and what we find is that they look for the answers with the divine, and they walk around with their face searching in the clouds looking for the face of God. And what we realize is that when we look down again, they have trampled ground in silence. And even when they do speak, one of the most disappointing things, which happened recently, a group of people from the faith community and other areas of society, some academics as well, were talking about how language should be changed within the African American community, how we should stop using the N word and the B word and the H word. Oh, and faggot too. So, nigger, bitch, hoe are worthy of apostrophizing, but apparently faggots aren't quite there yet. It's a powerful message, even though they were trying to be helpful. I think homophobia hurts most of all because it inspires silence from people of good conscience. When overt acts of racism occur, people not of that race and not of that color and not of that culture are quick to stand up and march shoulder to shoulder with their brothers. When we look at them and we think they are brave and bold. When there are overt acts of misogyny and violence against women, good men are quick to stand up and take back the night. They are quick to support the women that they know and love. And we look at them as progressive. But when there are overt acts of homophobia, and even more worryingly to me, when there are just the everyday, prevalent, mundane acts of homophobia that go on an ongoing basis, it inspires regretful silence. It inspires people to say nothing, except to think perhaps that things shouldn't really be this way, but I don't know if I'm the person to step in and say something. Too many people look at the situation, and we realize that few who are not G, L, B, or T are willing to stick their head above the rampart, because apparently there's nothing worse than supporting a gay person and having somebody think that you're a little too keen to do that, and so maybe you're a little bit too much that way. It inspires silence, and I think that's deadly. When I first came out, and I already spoken to somebody about this today, when I first came out, I thought that America's response would be evangelical and overwhelming. I thought it would be the bell curve skewed to a huge extent where 60-odd% of you rose up in damnation. And I was pleasantly surprised that that was not the case, that it was a few moronic voices on the one end saying a few moronic things, and on the other end, a few kinder and progressive people saying kind things, though I have to add, never to me. What I've come to realize is not the damage that happens here is not in those reverberating voices of the Tim Hardaways, rehabilitated or not, but rather in the silence in the middle. I believe that generic bigotry inhabits that silence. The silence that is left when its more specific offspring, whether it be homophobia or sexism or racism, goes unchallenged. That is where it lives. Every time I think of the situation with gay people in this country, and I think every time a child gets homework and all of a sudden that's gay, every time a man who's into the arts is obviously queer, anytime a woman who likes sports, who rebuffs a man's advances, who does well in business, who decides not to have children, is obviously a lesbian, those are the moments where we allow the silence. And the beast grows in that silence. It grows in the pause between their act and your second thought. It grows in the moment when we decide, we just can't take a stand every time. I'm not exactly sure how long I've gone right now, but I feel like I should keep going a little bit. I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture, and I often get accused of this. I freely admit that I am a cynic, and sadly I'm becoming more so over time. But everybody kept on telling me when I came out that it's 2007, there's no homophobia. In the same way that they suggested it's 2007, there's no racism, and there's 2007, there's no sexism. And I think we have to be a bit more realistic. In this country, homophobia is supported on an institutional level. We have people who take a good book and snip and cut and rearrange and paste and turn it into a terrorist letter. In this country, we have, and I can tell you for a fact that none of my peers and friends believe me when I tell them that in 33 states you can be fired for being gay. There is a clear message there. And even more insidious messages come when you look at some of the other laws, when you talk about adoption and marriage equity. Because adoption isn't just about reducing the rights of one person, it's about letting everybody else in the majority know, by the way, gay people, they're not so safe around children. And the marriage equity, somehow the love that I feel is not as good as the love that you feel. Somehow my happiness and security would be devastating to you, would bring on the end of days. This is the message that these policies and laws bring on. And then people want me to be more positive, and every time I look at change, it disappoints me, because policy is made today only to be repealed tomorrow. So progress never really moves in the way it should. And then people like to confuse the difference between progress and change. And when I talk to corporate audiences, they instantly understand the difference between progress and change, because progress gets them praise in their workplace, and change gets them a bonus. I want actual, tangible change. So I suppose from this, and in some way I do realize that by being here I'm talking somewhat to the choir, but I'm trying to get people to talk about these issues. Understand that just because they are not Glbt, they do relate, that they are all connected. And that if we are trying to reduce bigotry in general, then we have to cut off every one of its heads and not leave it thriving in any place. Homophobia hurts America because it's a place where ignorance, fear, anger, it's a place where they're let off their leashes. And once let off their leashes, they are not going to stop after feasting on all the GLBT people. These dogs will be insatiable. Insatiable. I'm not sure if I should, is that my 20 minutes? I'm not sure. I can keep going. You tell me, because I can keep going quite a while on this. I'm sadly quite pissed off. One of the things that's remarkable about homophobia is the fact that people don't realize it doesn't just affect gay people. People, as I tried to say at the beginning, aren't really sure about identities nowadays. And so what homophobia does actually is it affects everybody who's slightly different. When you enter a gray area, you're in trouble. Because it's not just the effeminate boys who end up being called queer. It's not just the butch, soccer-playing women who end up being called gay. It's anybody who's different. So homophobia actually becomes some construct that it's like a corset. It tells us again what our shape is supposed to be, that men are this and women are this, and no deviation is acceptable. It cuts down on creativity. It cuts down on our abilities to expand beyond what we are expected to do and achieve. It puts us in a position where we move back, we devolve instead of evolve. And that's one of the disappointing things about it. It splinters families and communities. One of the most powerful things that was ever said to me on this issue, a young boy who said he was not gay, or lesbian, gay, or bisexual, when asked why he didn't like these words being used around him, he said, because it undermines my fundamental dignity to hear these words, which is quite profound for a 16-year-old. It undermines my fundamental dignity to even hear these words. It is hard, what I'm asking, actually, from this stage, which is for people to intervene. Because you're going to find that whilst you do not hear people use the N-word as frequently as before in jokes around the keg at bars, you will find that gay is everywhere, in all the wrong places. And to challenge it gets boring, it gets dull, and it gets repetitive. But we can't let them get away with it because of the damage that it does. It's everywhere. It will pervade, it will go all through society. When I came out in this country, my biggest fears was that I was going to be killed, which I thought was melodramatic and stupid at the time. But every night I went to sleep, it's what I dreamt about. Now I realize that homophobia has a crushing effect in different ways. I find that as a reasonably well-educated person who has tried to live a reasonably holistic life, I found that I've suddenly been crushed from a three-dimensional to a one-dimensional character. I travel a lot, and when I get off planes and enter terminals, I find it's like entering the Children of the Corn. I get off a plane and all of a sudden people point aghast at the large black faggot. I find that people who sit in the seats next to me sometimes ask to be reseated lest they catch gay. I find that even some of the well-meaning people reveal their own ignorance when they come up to me and say, oh, I'm so glad you did this, because before you, I didn't realize black people could be gay. It's devastating to individuals' character when homophobia is acceptable in society. It confines all of us, not just the LGBT people. I would like to take some questions if I could.
Thanks very much. Stay right here. So now, as is our custom, we will take some questions. We have microphones on the floor and microphones up here on the in the pods, if you will, on the second level. So if you could, in fact, you might want to take that microphone up there if you're second in line, and we'll get to your question next. Please identify yourself, as is our custom here, briefly, and ask a brief question. It's not time for a debate, but it's time to have a question responded to. Thank you very much. Sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Waqar Ali. Very, very touching subject, and I really enjoyed listening to you. Homophobia hurts not only the US, but many countries around the world, almost all countries. You've decided to make this country your home for more than one reason. I'd like to hear from your perspective, how do you measure success in this activism that you've taken upon yourself? And why do you, make US your home?
Okay, I should add first that I do live in this country a lot, and I like it, but it's not home. I live in England, in London, in fact, 6 months of the year at least. In fact, when I first retired from basketball, I went straight home and had no intention of ever coming back here. I thought you were going to go to hell in a bush basket, and I wanted no part of it. However, I think that there are some responsibilities. So that's why I'm back. But how do we measure success? One piece of federal policy change in the next few years would be nice. The fact that there hasn't been any in about 30 years. Everybody looks at the sodomy law being repealed, and they failed to realize that that was repealed because there were farmers in the Midwest and some people up in the Northeast and some people right here in Boston who decided that, you know, what they do with their wife at night might also come under that law, and they didn't want any Larry Craig-esque kind of moments for them that were embarrassing. So that wasn't really about gay people, that was just about the prevalence of sodomy in this country. But that would be a big marker. Let's catch up with countries that don't have enough housing for any of their children, that have no schools. Let's catch up with some of the third world countries that have policies that are more progressive than here. You know, people use the religion excuse with America a lot, and there are countries that are, with no disrespect, legitimately embedded with their religion, like Spain, who made a change to their documentation about marriage of 2 words to make sure that same-sex couples could be included under marriage. I'm embarrassed as an English person because our law required 408 pages to have domestic partnerships, which is absurd. So we're not even getting into the point where, you know, progress and change is when young kids in school stop killing themselves, when gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender teens stop being truant to an absurdly disproportionate amount, stop being dropping out of school at a ridiculously expanded amount. Before we even get to those kind of less tangible, there are just some simple, let's make it so it's not acceptable for gay people to be fired in random states just because they're gay. That would be a good step forward. Let's make it so ENDER is not going to pass. Employment non-discrimination, it passed, and then it passed, and it's going to be vetoed. It's just, yeah, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. The Matthew Shepard Act. You know, hate crimes, I know they're a controversial subject amongst a lot of people. But if there is going to be one, then it should definitely apply to a group that, on a daily basis, you can read through the column inches in a newspaper and realize that, yes, another one has been attacked, another one has been beaten, another one has been killed. Policy first.
Why don't we go counterclockwise, and we'll take the gentleman up here.
My name's Devin Dewey. I want to thank you first for your passion, outrage, and eloquence on this topic, and the Kennedy Forum for providing this opportunity for people of the city of Boston to come and hear people like you. It's great. You said you work with corporations in your consulting, and I was wondering if you had any comments on the pink ceiling and whether making inroads there would have a cascade effect to society at large, or if you think it's going to happen the other way around.
I think that corporate America is light years ahead of society as a whole in terms of its reaction and its embracing of diversity in general, but certainly as far as Glbt people go. I recently had the chance to speak with what is the most senior gay person probably in the country. He's an executive, a VP for Merrill Lynch. And he very strongly believes that there needs to be more gay people in positions of visibility. My issue is that I don't believe in an equality of outcome. I believe in an equality of opportunity. And that's what I want. We will have more gay VPs. We will have more people in prominent positions if less of the gay children stop dropping out of school, stop killing themselves, stop spending their time through school with their mental functions and faculties focused so much on their self-protection, focusing on whether their wrist is breaking too much, whether they're walking to camp, whether they've looked at some guy too long. If we can equalize that opportunity at that level, and frankly, that is the same for Glbt people as it is for black people and other minorities as well. At that end, then the outcome will take care of itself. And then after equalizing opportunity, if in 20 years' time, 50 years' time, we look and it's still only one gay VP, then that is something I can live with. But we need to equalize the opportunity first.
Up here at the
Hi, my name is Scott, and I was actually wondering what it was like for you to live in Salt Lake City and make your living in front of a more conservative community, and how that was for you.
Salt Lake City is the gayest place I've ever lived. Without a doubt. People underestimate the power of a restrictive and somewhat suffocating prominent culture to create a more vibrant subculture. And Salt Lake is certainly one of those places. The day I arrived in Salt Lake, I was being escorted around by one of the managers of the team and one of the assistant coaches, and in front of me there were two men holding hands walking down the street. You know, I looked to both sides of me, and these people were apparently invisible to them. But living in Salt Lake, most of my friends in this country are lapsed Mormons. And I have to admit, I had a great time living in Salt Lake. I did not find it, don't read too much into that. I found it to have certain places that were really vibrant and embracing. It had certainly a university community that was very interested in non-conformist behavior of any kind.
And what is the NBA community like, or the athletic community in general?
I think people have mistakes with the NBA community. It's not just a bunch of dumb urban guys who can't get their head around gay folk. It's owners. It's the people with the money, rather than the people who have got the money, rather than the people who are being given the money. They're the issue. In Salt Lake City, Larry Miller, the owner of the Jazz, did not let Brokeback Mountain play at his theaters. This is not very subtle news and messaging to John, by the way, stay right where you are. Don't move anywhere. There's no coming out of anything. Because if he won't let a movie play at his cinemas, he's unlikely to want a player on his team. So within the athletic community, as long as we kept it at a very don't ask, don't tell kind of level, my teammates were very respectful and cared for me. They just weren't interested. They would like to tell me about their exploits while they wore their "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets, talking about the 3 ladies that they shagged the night before, but they didn't want to hear about me going to the cinema with my partner. There's work to be done still.
Let's take this woman over here.
Hi.
Hello.
I was wondering, you mentioned at one point how you underestimated the reaction of Americans after you came out a few years ago, and I was wondering if you could share with us an example where the reaction of someone or of a group of people impressed you, but in a positive manner, where you expected maybe less tolerance or more aggressivity, and where people were reacted in a good way, or like something that impressed you.
Okay. I think one of the easiest examples of that is the fact that it is well known that there's a disconnect between the Glbt community and the black community in this country. I personally believe it's a political construct. However, when I first came out, my biggest fear was that with the black community there, I would find the most resistance. One of the first days that I was on book tour in February, I walked through a very empty Orlando airport, probably at an absurd time in the morning, I think. And one of the baggage handlers was on a break, obviously, walking through. He saw me, did a double take, stopped, and then started walking towards me. Now, granted, I'm 6'9" and 320 pounds, so the one-on-one interactions don't necessarily frighten me that much. But still, I didn't want any hassle. And this person who I prejudged walked up to me, and I imagined, I don't know what kind of vitriol, and instead came up to me, extended his hand, and said, "Cool what you did," and then wandered off. And I thought that was, for me, a lesson for me, a slap in my face, that I certainly was at that time, doing the very same things I request that people not do to me. But I think it was one of the heartwarming beginnings. And there were many other situations where I encountered people who you would imagine, because they were Baptist or because they were black or because they were something else, they would react badly, and they didn't.
Hi, my name is Sion. I'm a grad student here. First off, I wanted to thank you very much. I know that there's a lot of people here who really appreciated seeing the flyer that said that you were coming. So thank you for what's been a great talk. I wanted to ask specifically about a new line of research in science, which is exploring this idea of a gay gene. And I've heard a lot of people in the LGBT community who are offended by that type of research, and I've heard people who are very encouraged and think, well, this will show that it's not a choice, it's who we are. What, if anything, do you think about this research, and then what do you think it contributes to this homophobia in America? Do you think it encourages it, or do you think it might actually be a step in the right direction?
This is all very off the top of my head here. All right, I welcome research. I think research is generally good. I think you learn more about the question, about people from the question rather than the answer. The problem with it, deciding whether if it's not a choice that makes it better for me, is the idea that there is a constitution here that's, a pretty well-regarded document, and it doesn't state that people should have freedoms based on whether it's a choice or not, in most cases. So why would it matter if it's a choice? No, I personally don't believe it's a choice. When I was growing up, I was the fat kid in the corner of the library. The last thing on my mind was sex. The last thing on my mind was creating another way that this big, tall, dorkish, nerdish geek could be different again. So for me, not a choice. And certainly from the research I've read and seen, there's lots of evidence to support in genetic, biological, innate, temperamental reasons. But it worries me that we've got to this point now where it has to be not a choice. Does that mean, am I only acceptable as a black person because I didn't pick it? If I chose to tan, that would make, I don't understand. There's something underlying that I think is quite worrying. Not the research itself, but the fact that that would be the only way that I would become acceptable.
Up in the right side, please.
My name is Marco Chan, and I'm a freshman here at Harvard College. Just another repeat of thanks to the organizers and you for making this possible. I was just wondering if you had any comments or observations, remarks to make on the issue of race and ethnicity within the LGBT community itself, whether you felt like that's an issue at all and whether you've had some personal experiences with that.
I am a bit of a box buster when it comes to identity bits. People have a hard time deciding what I am because I'm sometimes, in people's mind, too British to be black, or too gay to be black, or too athletic to be gay, or I tire of the labels that we use. I think both amongst the black community that I am a part of and amongst the gay community that I'm part of, the idea that those two labels make us homogenous are absurd to me. The similarities between me and another black face in this room may not be that great. It doesn't shatter us as a group. It doesn't make us totally disparate, but at the same time you have to respect that the fact that within the group there's huge diversity. And within the gay community there are people who say that there is a good kind of gay, which is, I don't even know what they look like, TR Knight maybe? And there's other types of gay that are somehow not accessible. The people who are too feminine if they're men, or too butch if they're women, or a lot of people, if you're black, that's not right, or as a gay person. I think the labels that we're using right now, people are nuanced. We are sophisticated. By definition, we are gestalt. It's not going to work just having one label. We need to be cleverer than that.
Lisa Maraki, I wanted to ask you about silence, because that really resonated with me, that I feel that the problem that we're dealing with now most today is silence. And I wanted to ask you how we break it and when we break it, because you are someone who obviously had to live in silence for a long time, and now you've chosen to speak for your whole life. And I wanted to ask you about what that is like and what possibly we might do as people who are trying to break the silence but trying to learn how to do so?
It's a large question. I mean, I often think you transpose the insulting act or word to another less acceptable form. So how many times would you walk by in your cafeteria or in the halls of the dorms or your place of residence when somebody used the N-word? How many times would that go unacknowledged, even with a look? Even with the look that said, that's not the way I do things. I don't think it would, whereas, you know, things being gay is kind of du jour. Pens are gay, books are gay, microphones are gay, suits are gay. It's everywhere because people don't challenge it. And sometimes, whilst I'm not sure that this is appropriate, you know, politically correct dog raising technique, sometimes you have to rub the dog's nose in it immediately after he does it. Sometimes there's no point in waiting for 2 days and then revisiting that because the memory's gone. Oh, what am I being punished for? Sometimes it has to be now, right now. You soiled the carpet, this is what you did, don't do it. And it also can't be that thing where you do it on Tuesdays and Fridays, but not on the other days. There's no consistency. It also can't be the kind of thing where when the dog messes on your carpet, you do it, but when you're somewhere else, when it's in the middle of the quadrangle, for example, you let him leave a great big steamer there. It has to be consistent, and it has to be in every single environment. I look at it you know, this in a very global warming kind of way, in that in Europe right now there's this big argument that Germany is having with Sweden because Germany's great big smokestacks are spewing out crap that travels into the atmosphere and then tends to drop as acid rain, stripping the trees in Sweden. And that's how it is here. It can't be that people's words of malice are looked at as a local phenomena. They affect wide swathes of areas. You never know when something is said in jest one place and someone walks by that, through that cloud, and are immensely affected. It's one metaphor too many, sorry.
I'm JJ, a grad student here. First of all, I want to thank you for coming out and giving an exceptional speech. I wonder if you could elaborate more on something you said about Tim Hardaway. And the question I had was, what was some of the positive support you received from fellow NBA players after you came out, and some of the negative commentary and how you felt about it?
I mean, in fairness, Tim Hardaway and a few other people said some very stupid things. The "I hate gay people, they shouldn't exist in the world" comments were powerful. I happen to find them a bit laughable because I suppose it's the way I dealt with that. The problem with his comments was that the day after he said it, moments in fact after he said it and it went on the web, I got emails from as far away as Japan, lots of places in Eastern Europe, Australia, and of course Europe and America, from kids who were saying that they were going to change their behavior. I'm afraid to go to school, I'm going to drop off my sports team, I'm not going to take part in my organization on campus because I feel more afraid. I feel that people will be emboldened by his words. So his words had a powerful effect. But on the positive side, you had people like Shaquille O'Neal and Grant Hill and Doc Rivers from here in Boston who said great things. My issue was that whilst I felt that Tim Hardaway's comments most definitely were talking to me, I felt that the people who commented and complimented me were talking about me to the media. I have not spoken, with one exception, to any player from the NBA since February. Most of the IMs, most of them have disappeared, blocked off my messenger. And the ones who will talk to me will pass me in an airport terminal as if I was invisible. And then when we enter the Admirals Club or whatever, where there are less people, then they'll come out and ask, "Oh, how you doing? Yeah, I saw you before, but I was busy on the phone." You know, so it's disappointing on both ends of the spectrum, but one is a lot more damaging than the other.
Good. Any further questions? thank you. Well, let me ask one. Just as we think about the United States, and I've also lived in other countries as well, in some of the countries that you've played in, you note a qualitative difference, John, between homophobia in this country and as you've experienced it in other countries. And I'm not thinking just of the UK. What do you think, though, explains that? I mean, you believe that that's true, that that it is much worse here, and I'm willing to take your word for that. But what is it that fundamentally explains? I'll take the last question for myself. In your view, that qualitative difference.
I mean, there are several things. One we've already talked about. There are not many countries where the government endorses bigotry in this way, or homophobia specifically in this way. And the countries that do, you would probably not be proud to be associated with. Even as far as don't ask, don't tell, which clearly, again, the subtext of that message is, by the way, gay people, a bit weak, unreliable, and of course, wildly sexually promiscuous, couldn't trust them in a firefight because they might jump on top of me. That is the subtext of that. And there aren't that many countries that do that. And that's one of the major things, the fact that the policies feed people's fears. It feeds the ignorance. It adds to the kind of the hyperbole and the messaging about gay people. But one of the other parts is the heterosexism here is rampant. And even as far as I go, I thought I came out in a fairly large way in this country. Most people don't realize I've been out in England for a decade. That information just never traveled across the Atlantic. Because, and probably the best example of why that is because a reporter who does not like me very much finished an article in Britain when all the fuss was going on over here that ended, what John Amichi doesn't realize is that being gay doesn't make him any more interesting. And that was the way people thought. But here there's a heterosexism, certainly a feeling of way things should be that is far more demanding. And even though I came out in a large way, I still have people who come up to me. And when I was talking with a friend of mine at the apartment complex I live in, who's helping me kind of refresh French, and some bloke came up to me afterwards and said, "Wow, that must really work well with the ladies." I just looked at him incredulous. I was like, "Don't you watch television?" And in that moment, I was faced with that thing again. I had to come out again. I've done this on 60 Minutes. I've done it on whatever you've got. I've been on it. And yet now, in front of you right now, you are demanding that I do this again, and you're making my life uncomfortable. And I didn't. It's been weighing on my mind for about 6 weeks now. The fact that I could come out one big sway and then again, it just shows you how powerful and difficult it is. And these are the types of things I think that make the difference. And again, how homophobia hurts America, frankly, you only got a title because you demanded one. And I said, how America, because you're American, and we all have a self-interest thing, don't we? And if I'd have said how it affects England, half of you wouldn't have bothered showing up. So please don't misunderstand me. I know very well that this type of bigotry is alive and well in Britain. But I have to say that the way people respond to it is a little different. You know, when Elton John and his partner got married, one of the things that made me most proud of being British was watching that wedding and watching the people who were watching it. It wasn't just swathes and swathes of gay people, who of course were there, but it was Granny with her blue hair holding onto her husband who just wasn't sure if he wanted to be there. It was the family with the dad waving like an idiot with a cheesy grin on his face, with his daughter on his shoulders waving like an idiot with a cheesy grin on her face. And I just don't think that, I don't see that Macy's parade type of picture happening if that were to happen here. And I think it's a shame, because this is the superpower. This is the country that has so much potential to do so much. And to waste its energy on furthering bigotry and ignorance, on stepping back in time, keeping the status quo, seems a shame.
Well, thank you. This has been a very... This has been a very important event for us here at the Kennedy School, and again, I would just like to thank John Amichi for honoring us with his presence, his honesty, and his thoughtful comments. So please, another round of applause. Thank you, John.